Next evil list. Ian?
Absolutely not. Don't make me do this.
Welcome to Into the West Middle-earth SBG podcast. My name is Charles. With me today are Ian and Richard. And today we'll be talking about the Nations Cup. It is the first MESBG Nations Cup. We'll be going over some lists, talking about the tournament, and we'll each be giving our thoughts on the event. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick shout out of the sponsor of the video, Baron of Dice. They make some great Middle-earth SBG dice as well as dice for many other games. Go check out their products on their website. You can use our promo code WEST for 5% off your order. And also want to thank Mithril Brush Painting Competition for sponsoring this video. If you want more information on the competition, as well as how to enter and how to support the competition, just check out the link below. Also want to say that we're doing a Patreon promotion where after 1 month of signing up, we will be sending out 1 pack of dice.
Custom Into the West dice.
Yes. Also, a quick thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon for supporting us. If you want to see extra content, see videos early, and other perks, please check out all of the perks in the link below. All right, back to the video.
Okay. So like Charles said, we are reviewing the first Nations Cup in 2024. Shout out to Matt King, who is one of the TOs of this event. He supplied us with a lot of information, so we didn't have to lift a finger, as well as Michael Bradford, who gave us a lot of info about this event. And for anyone who followed along over the weekend or are interested in watching some of the stream games, can check out Battle Camper's YouTube channel. I would highly recommend it, but we're just going to go over some of the more overall reviews of this event. So not too much in detail. If you want to see all the detailed like lists and breakdowns and everything, you can also find that information on the Facebook page, the Nations Cup and MESBG official page. So yeah, this year it was in Antwerp, Belgium, with 20 teams and 15 nations. So there were some countries with duplicate teams. I believe some of the more prominent MESBG countries like England and Germany and maybe the Netherlands. So the format of the Nations Cup is a little bit different. It's 800 points and it's a good versus evil format, and it's also team-based. So every team has 6 different players and 4 good lists and 4 evil lists that were submitted. And each team had 1 dummy list for good and 1 dummy list for evil. So basically, when the TOs released all the lists, we didn't really know which one could have been a dummy list. It kept some suspense there. So there was overall 160 lists submitted with an average model count of 44.5. So keep in mind, this is 800 points. The lowest model count army is 7. The highest model count army, 114. The most common out of all lists was 46. So what do you guys think of those stats?
I'm a little confused about the 4 good, 4 evil thing, considering there's only 6 people on each team. Because wouldn't that make...
Well, each team has 2 dummy lists.
Oh,
yeah. So
I thought it was one
they're
dummy
only
on top of
yeah.
the... Yeah, never mind. That's including it.
So basically, each team would submit 8 lists, and then they're playing with 6.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're forced to play 3 good, 3 evil.
Yeah, and also as a caveat for people who don't know, this is supposed to be a ultra competitive tournament.
So I'm assuming the average model count is like a bell curve, right? So like the highest and lowest, we can kind of discount those. So given that the fact that the most common model count and the average count are both in the mid 40s suggests to me that more people are taking more towards like the numbers side rather than elite, because you'd expect that to be closer to like 40 if more people were taking more elite lists.
I mean, I guess I could have calculated the median. I didn't think there were too many outliers. I think that's the reason why I just took the average.
Yeah, just because like in my experience, like more elite lists will tend towards like the 34 to 38 model count. And if the average is kind of skewed up to mid 40s, it kind of suggests there's less of that and more of the average to higher tier model count wise.
Yeah, I think the fact also that there's an equal amount of good and evil lists It suggests that, yes, maybe they are gravitating away from elite armies, because if it wasn't a good versus evil event, then you would probably need to see the breakdown of good armies versus evil armies to be able to kind of make a prediction. But here, I think Ian's right. It's pretty clear that there are probably less elite armies than maybe we're used to seeing.
Right. So speaking of good and evil armies, let's see the breakdown of all the lists submitted. So starting from good. So keep in mind there are 20 teams here. So we can see at the high end, we have 15 Lothlorien as the most prevalent good faction. Any surprises here? We have Lothlorien, Rivendell, Halls of Thranduil. So basically the top three are elf factions.
None of this is surprising. Okay, well, I'm a little surprised all three elf factions took the top three. I wouldn't have thought that. The fact that one or two of them would be elves, that's not surprising, but all three, yeah, that's whack. But no, that makes sense. They are the easiest thing to ally in the good list, right? So they can go with everything.
Probably not a fair comparison, but when we reviewed the top armies of 2023 and we had Elliot on to talk about the GBHL armies, Minas Tirith was number one because they were taken in many like alliance lists. But here, I mean, number four is still pretty high, but I would have expected maybe only two elven factions are near the top, so that it is a little bit surprising. But yeah, maybe Minas Tirith would be in the top three if I were to guess. So this is interesting.
But keep in mind that Minas Tirith was only that high because it was propped up by GBHL 80s and 90s, which are a little less competitive.
At this level of competition, like a lot of people are going to be running alliances, whether they're green alliances or yellow. Like there's just going to be a lot more alliances in general. And I'm willing to bet the three the most common models you're going to see from each of these factions is Galadriel, Glorfindel, and Legolas. Probably. Right?
Yeah, and I think just to support that, we see like 9 Misty Mountains as well. I don't think there's a pure eagle list. Like I think I skimmed through. It's just Gwaihir being thrown in, which is as expected.
I know a while ago we were saying that this is like a legendary legions meta. First legendary legions I see are like near the middle. You have like Defenders of Helm's Deep. They're sort of close to the middle. So a lot of people still playing regular armies, for good side at least.
I'm also quite surprised about that. Is Defenders is the one that ranks the highest, and that it's being taken this much. That one's shocking to me. I don't know. I would expect other legions to make it up there before that.
Well, that is a perfect transition to the evil armies. So, speaking of a legendary legion meta, yeah, 18 of the 20 teams had a Host of the Dragon Emperor list submitted.
How much you want to bet they also had an assault on Lothlorien?
Assault on Lothlorien is third, so it is definitely up there. The English, which have really pushed the Mordor Serpent Horde alliance, that combo is also up there. Dark Denizens of Mirkwood, that's a lot of Spider Queens being thrown in as well with Mordor.
Isengard surprisingly high.
I feel like that's got to be like Saruman getting allied in at 800.
There are a few Sarumans allied in, but I will say that listening to some of the UK podcasts like Heroic Stats and Golems Gamers, they actually have a lot more spam crossbow lists than we see in North America. That's a thing. So they're kind of bringing it back old school there.
Yeah. Speaking of crossbows, though, it's still a little bit surprising that it's above Corsairs. Maybe there's something with Isengard that players aren't seeing over here. But
I feel like Corsair is like at 800. It's not where it shines the most. It shines a little bit lower points values. Also, other note, I know you guys kind of hate on Dark Denizens, but I mean, in a good versus evil format, it makes sense. And of course, you saw elves were basically in every single, like, there was an elf list in every single team.
I think you're thinking of Fell Beings or Mirkwood.
Yep, I'm thinking of the wrong list.
Dark Denizens just means they have the Spider Queen allied.
Yep. I'm a little tired.
We definitely don't hate on Dark Denizens of Mirkwood.
My bad. I definitely mixed those two up.
Yeah.
I'll shut up now.
You're not forgiven.
We do see some interesting ones, like there's a couple Black Riders thrown in there. There's Adepts of Moria, 2 Dunlin. And then the most interesting is there's only 1 assault on Helm's Deep. So even though this is the first Nations Cup, I think in the past they had a different kind of like a world championship event that was also like team based and very similar format. And I believe in past years it was assault on Helm's Deep is where the host of the Dragon Emperor is right now. Basically every team took it. So how the mighty have fallen, it's gone from first to last here.
3 nerfs will do it.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking that it's tying in there with Barad-dûr, which I feel is just like a sabotage list.
Yeah, yeah.
Are these including the dummy lists as well?
These are including the dummies, so it could have been a
Okay.
dummy list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, so could have the assault.
All right. So we have the results. So in podium, we have Team Poland taking the win here. And second is Team France. And third is Team Germany. So we'll be going through like the list of all 3 podiums, but only in detail for Team Poland. And then just looking at some of the other rankings. I know we're more familiar with Team USA. They actually assembled quite the team this year, and I know they didn't maybe quite reach the result that they wanted. I think they did okay. They were a little bit middle of the pack, but getting some insider information, talking to someone on the team, it seemed like some of the issues they encountered was due to inexperience with the format, like how we went over in the start, like we don't really play good versus evil too much in North America. And also we don't have teamed format tournaments. So the draft and the way that like the pairings were paired up, like, is a little different than they were used to. So, we have hope that our American compatriots will do better next year. And also speaking of North America, unfortunately, Team Canada at the bottom with Wooden Spoon. I'm not sure exactly how this team was formed, but I don't believe there was that much big of a push this year to send some super competitive players. I know a couple of the Ontario like competitive players, and I don't believe any were able to make the trip out there. So I don't know if we want to have a redemption year, maybe Nations Cup 2025.
Should have Canada East, Canada West, and US East, US West. Or maybe we can make a Cascadia team.
Yeah, we definitely need to redeem ourselves. I guess looking at some of the top placers, it's not too much surprise. We've heard a lot about Team Poland, Team France, Team Germany, even Team Italy. They have regular like high performers at like Articon, and yeah, they just seem to have a very, very strong MESBG scene. A little bit surprised that Team England, it seemed they had like an all-star roster as well. But again, if you look at the TPs, looked incredibly close. And it really just seems like it's tough with the team format because you're looking at the results of 6 different games. It's hard for 1 or 2 players to carry you. If you have a couple bad matchups, it's really hard to come back from.
I mean, to England's credit, if you look at like the victory points they scored, they've outscored every other team except first place, just pure victory points wise. So I think it's just the way those individual games shook out.
All right. So I guess going through our podium, just a high level look at what they brought. So this is what they actually played with after removing the dummy list. So from Team Germany, who took home 3rd place, for good side, they had an Iron Hills, Halls of Thranduil, Survivors of Laketown, Misty Mountains, Lothlorien Shire. So 2 triple alliances and Defenders of Helm's Deep. And then for evil, they played Angmar, Host of the Dragon Emperor, and a Mordor Denizens of Mirkwood list. So I don't have the list in front of me, so I'm not exactly sure what kind of Angmar this is. The reason why I say that is I actually saw 2 variations of Angmar at this tournament. It wasn't just the Witch King Gullivar that we usually see. There seems to have been a resurgence of shade lists. There was several Angmar shade lists. So there were a few that took like orc captains with the shade, and I think there's one that took Birder as well. But yeah, sorry to Team Germany, I don't have the list in front of me, so can't say for sure. But yeah, they did run an Angmar.
Curious about this Shire contingent. Like, is it? I don't know. Is it just like a Farmer Maggot and his dogs for a little bit of like cheap speed and extra might, or is it like I don't know? It'd have to be
Could it be Gandalf the Grey?
I guess Gandalf and then just some guys to boost the numbers.
From what I believe, it wasn't Gandalf the Grey. It was actually a pretty heavy Hobbit contingent because Lothlorien is just Galadriel and a few elves, and then Gwaihir from Misty Mountains. There were actually a few of these variants, and they were the ones that hit around 70 models. So I think that's quite interesting because we haven't really seen that, but it's an interesting way to get numbers, fight five, and of course Galadriel comboing with Gwaihir.
So the way the team system plays out is you'll probably want lists with a variety of strengths and utility, right? Spread throughout your team. So when you pair up the matches, you can kind of match certain armies against, in certain scenarios, against certain armies.
Yeah, yeah. But I do think you also want some armies that can be like all arounders because if your opponent is choosing the matchup, you want a few of the lists, let's say you're putting down first, to be able to take on, anything that it can come up against. Yeah, it's definitely very interesting, but I agree with you that I think the team format opens up more possibilities for skewed armies.
Which is interesting. I feel like out of all of these, the defenders plays the most into like a skew kind of list, just because it's generally so reliant on shooting. And I'm not quite sure what the build for that looks like at 800. Is it Theoden, Gamling, Legolas, and I don't know what the other hero would be. But for their evil half, I mean, it makes sense. Like Angmar and Host of the Dragon Empire, they're both still very, very good lists. And, they both can take on a lot of different opponents and do like they don't have a lot of bad matchups. And then obviously Mordor Dark Denizens it's going to be good. You got the Spider Queen thrown in there. It's going to be solid with the Mordor and the extra magic that they bring.
So let's move on to second place. We have Team France. On the good side, they ran a Minas Tirith, Lothlorien Rohan, Ian Special, an Army of Lake Town with Thorn's Company. And the evil side, they have Assault on Lothlorien, the Goblin Town with a Spider Queen, and Black Riders. So I actually watched Team France's Black Riders on the stream, and we don't see that a lot around here, but I can see how well it worked in a team format like this, especially when a lot of the times you're just looking for the win. It's extremely potent. Like it's nice to have like a big victory, but you're already contributing a lot to your team if you can pull off like a minor win, especially if it's like a supposedly tough matchup.
I guess the Black Riders is the most skewed on out of the evil list, and on the good list, I would say Army of Lake Town and Thorn's Company. So having played that alliance myself, it has several weaknesses, but you just crank out the numbers.
Yeah. I'm assuming, the Army of Lake Town and the Minas Tirith one are both pretty high on the numbers. Probably at least 50, maybe probably 60 something at least in the Army of Lake Town, maybe 70.
Yeah.
I want to see the Lothlorien Rohan list. I'm curious what kind of a build they went for, like heroes wise. Can I steal it? I don't
You
know.
probably have the exact same list.
Galadriel Theodred.
Yeah.
It's the perfect base.
Okay, so let's move on to Team Poland. On a high level view, their good armies are Defenders of Helm's Deep, Halls of Thranduil, Survivors of Lake Town, Rohan, Lothlorien, Misty Mountains. And then on the evil side, we have Assault on Lothlorien, Dragon Emperor, and Witch King Saladin. Yeah, hold your thoughts. We'll look more in depth into each and one of these lists.
I think it's funny that the evil side is just the meme list that everybody was complaining about before the FAQ.
Yeah.
It's
They-
too overpowered. And now it's
they,
still there. Haha.
They literally just picked the best stuff out there, and it worked. And I believe during the award ceremony, one of the TOs threw out this stat that evil dominated over the weekend in these matchups. So I don't know, maybe that's a discussion for another day. Are we in a totally evil dominated meta now?
I think that idea has been out there for a while. Well, at least ever since the last book came out, right? With these two legions that are up there right now. So
But I
definitely-
have heard counter arguments about how in higher points, good kind of like comes back a little bit. But yeah, it could be interesting. So going into our first list, Team Poland's good army. Charles, do you want to go over this one?
Yeah, so this is the Rohan Lothlorien Misty Mountains list. and the army leader is Guahir. So in Warband 1, we have Theodred on a horse with his shield, leading 12 Rohan Royal Guard, 2 Rohan Royal Guard on horses, and 1 Rohan Royal Guard with a banner. Warband 2, we have Galadriel, leading 10 Guard of the Galadrim Court, 4 Galadrim warriors with spear and bow, 2 with spear and shield, and 2 Wood Elf Sentinels. Warband 3 is the army leader Guahir. And then that is a total of 800 points, 36 models. Break at 18 with 6 bows. Ian's not impressed.
No, I'm confused. This feels like an Angmar army, but instead of shitty orcs, you have like fight 6 D6 battle line. But then like the way it works is the same because you use the Sentinels and Galadriel to pull out things, and then Theodred and Guahir just smush them. It's like I see how it works. I'm just the build is very interesting.
When I first saw this alliance, I was like, okay, this is probably a more like well-balanced list. But then I look at this craziness and it's like 10 Guard of the Galadrim Court, 2 Wood Elf Sentinels. I mean, fair enough. Wood Elf Sentinels are probably amazing in the good versus evil matchup. I like it. Like, it seems like he has a lot of stuff. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, no throwing spears.
So
I would
not quite an Ian list.
No, but I could basically do this. If I gave them throwing spears, I could do this list.
I guess you can downgrade a couple Guard of the Galadrim Court
Yeah.
for the throwing spears.
No, it would be hard to tinker with. It's a lot of fight 6. I guess they're
Yeah.
thinking fight 5 meta, or maybe coming up against Host of the Dragon Emperor. Maybe that's what they're thinking, because this it doesn't outdice it, but like the D6 up front and the fight 6 behind, like it goes well against the Dragon Emperor battle line. And then the 2 Killy heroes that it has does well against the Dragon Emperor list. So
Typically, when we see a list with both Galadriel and Guahir, we see Galadriel as the leader. As far as I know, this was not a veto event, right? So if Contest of Champions came up, I guess they could match Galadriel with an opponent with also like a not very powerful combat leader. But I guess Galadriel's a safer pick. But like in case that scenario comes up, Guahir is much better.
I don't think it's worth it, because like at this level, if you have like Galadriel as your leader, I don't like the matchup probably doesn't matter. You're gonna lose that game. So like out of one, like, how many rounds did they play? 5, 6?
6, yeah.
6. So if in one of those you basically one of your people is guaranteed to lose, like I think that's just a chance you don't want to take. But maybe that is something you take for the security in the rest of the list, the games. But like I don't know, Charles, you played Guahir a bunch. Like is if you had him as your leader, would you be that worried? Like does he die that often?
No, but he has been wounded before. The times where I have played a list with both of these heroes, I tend to pick Galadriel as a leader and just take that risk. But again, that's probably not a good idea if you want to win every single game, right?
Yeah. Well, it's also like Wahir in contests. He's a pretty good leader. Like he's pretty reliable at just getting a bunch of kills. So it kind of turns like a really, really bad matchup into a pretty good one for you. And especially when you have that much fight 6 that you just throw at the enemy leader to slow him down.
Speaking of the scenarios, I'll just quickly go through before we continue on with the lists, just so we have this in mind, roughly what they played. Round 1 was Lords of Battle. Round 2 was Fog of War. Round 3 was Hold Ground. Round 4 was Reconnoiter. Round 5 was Divide and Conquer. And round 6 was To the Death. So it seems to me like a bit of a fighty pack. There wasn't any of like domination, breakthrough, that quick capture and control, those kind of scenarios. There's a bit of movement there with Reconnoiter and Divide and Conquer and a little bit of Hold Ground, but yeah, it was quite brawly.
I'm not sure I agree. I feel like it's a pretty good mix.
Maybe I'm just saying the To the Death and Lords of Battle.
I mean, yeah, because they are both the kill like directly ones where you just have to kill models as opposed to like killing heroes and stuff.
Yeah.
But like Fog still requires a decent amount of movement, and like Hold, Ground, Wreck, and Divide, they all encourage movement.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Hold's just towards one area, so it's kind of neutral, but still it's random deployment, right?
Fair enough. Okay, so let's go on to the second good list for Poland. This is a list that we do see a lot in North America. Ian and I both personally have this army as well. So Ian, do you want to do the honors?
I mean, what can you say? It just, you get the good magic caster, you get the really good combat hero. Okay, So the first warband, and I guess the army leader is going to be Thranduil. He has the Elven Made Sword, the Circlet of Kings, and heavy armor. So interesting, no mount. 5 elves with shield, 5 with elf bow, 4 palace guards with shield, 2 cavalry with shield, 1 sentinel, and 1 palace guard with spear, shield, and banner. The second warband is Gandalf with a horse. He has 8 Lake Town militia with spear, shield, and axes, 4 Lake Town militia with spear, bow, and axes, and 3 Lake Town militia with spears and axes. And his third warband is a Lake Town militia captain. No shield, I guess. 40. Yeah, I guess he doesn't
No
have shield.
shield.
5 militia with shield and axe, and 4 militia with spear, bow, and axe. A lot of axes, which makes sense. 45 models, so and 15 bows total. And I guess that's 8 might. Yeah. Yeah, that's a chunky model count. And I think the Mirkwood warband is maxed out. So yeah, it's still like almost half elves, just under half, 40%. And they're all going to be fitting inside that bubble that Thranduil gives, or most of them will. Yeah, I mean it's solid. I'm kind of surprised they didn't give Thranduil a mount, but I guess he's just supposed to be sitting in the line there, and you're relying on the +1 from the army bonus to do the damage and the axes on the militia, which like fair enough. You are going to do a lot of damage with that. But I would have thought, they'd drop 1 model because it's not going to change the break and give him at least a horse, but
I mean, to be fair, he is one of the heroes where him like being on foot is just as good. And a lot of the times, like you want him on foot. So I don't hold anything against that build. I've seen him on, spec'd out and with horse and elk as well. But there's a lot of people that will argue and strongly believe that he's the best on foot. And, they have a good argument.
This alliance is also pretty popular over here in North America, but I noticed several interesting like differences. So here I would say for like a similar amount of points, I see more people take Bard and the kids over Gandalf. It's a different kind of list, and I see the benefits that Gandalf brings. The other difference I'm seeing is that there aren't any glaives on the elves, so it looks like the elves are like the front line and then supported by militia, right? While over here, I think you see more of elves in the back and maybe the militia in the front, and the
Kind of,
elves providing the elven maid support.
kind of a
I
mixed line, I think, here.
Yeah, but like there are militia also with shields in the front, but like there
I
aren't
think
any elven supports.
no, he's right. It's mostly elves up front, which I think that's has to do with the good versus evil format. Like if you're playing good versus good matchups, you want to have more of the fight 5, fight 6 spear supports to be able to run around in the back rank. Whereas against like evil, it doesn't matter as much. And you have to keep in mind most of this list is like at least half, more than half of this is Lake Town Militia, which don't have great courage. So he's got, a bunch of elves with courage 5. He's got 4 palace guard that are gonna be up in the front with bodyguard to make the charges that they need.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing where if you're not experiencing good versus evil, I think you might miss a lot of the nuances because, yeah, he's probably thinking Black Numenorians, Angmar, yeah, to counter that because you also don't see a lot of like Palace Guard frontline, right? Like technically, the efficient way to have them is in the second rank supporting because they're a lot more protected. Your fight 6, but in a heavy terror matchup, they have bodyguard, so that's invaluable. I do think that Gandalf the Grey pick over Bard or Legolas is a lot more well-rounded. Looking at this list with 45 models too, you have a big beat stick, you have the march, you have a caster, like you really can match up with anything.
Yeah, I feel like this is the one that they have on their good side where they're like, don't really care what it gets matched up against. There's maybe like a couple bad things, but it'll be fine fighting whatever it gets thrown against.
Okay, so going on to their third list, Ian, you were curious. Defenders of Helm's Deep. So I also watched this game on stream. It was this army versus England's Host of the Dragon Emperor in Reconnoiter. So that was an interesting match. But anyway, Warband 1, Theoden with shield and armor, leading 15 Royal Guard with throwing spears. Warband 2, we have Legolas Greenleaf leading 12 Gladrim Warrior with elf bow and spear. In Warband 3, we have Gamling with the special manner, leading 9 warriors of Rohan with shield, throwing spear, and axe. And in the Warband 4, we have Haldir with heavy armor and elf bow, leading Aldor to a total of 41 models and 13 bows.
Does Aldor have accuracy?
Yes,
Okay, maybe that's why he's here.
I believe so. And he actually did utilize that quite a bit. I think he did 2 wounds that were like faded by the Dragon Emperor, like just the Dragon Emperor running up and reconnoiter. So yeah, he didn't do like the bows didn't do too much damage like to the Easterling line, but doing wounds on the Dragon Emperor, forcing resources was pretty big.
It's just going to be Aldor sitting there, accuracy every turn for free.
That's what I'm saying. I think we might have underrated him in our tier list. I don't think he's a meme.
He's still a meme, but there's potential there. And this is a great way to demonstrate that. Yeah, if you have Legolas and Haldir pumping out 5 shots between them that are might back, along with the other dozen bows and all the throwing spears once they get close. Yeah, the accuracy on repeat is pretty good for picking off heroes and getting wounds, like you said.
Not too much to add. It looks pretty scary with lots of shooting and throwing spears and tons of might. So not usually the list that I would personally gravitate towards, but like I would hate facing this.
I was just surprised at the 41 models. Like that's pretty good for considering how hero heavy this is.
Well, yeah, also considering a third of it is Royal Guard with throwing spears, like 12 points. That's a model. That's a lot. I'm curious about this though, just considering the play style. I don't know. I guess the scenarios that popped up did it pretty well because you can get a lot of points from wounding specific heroes and or killing the leader and breaking, rather than just getting objectives, because it doesn't get to objectives well, like at all. Even your heroic combats off of your heroes to fling guys, like they're all 2-attack heroes. Like they don't slingshot guys super well or like reliably.
Yeah, you do have 2 marches in the list.
No spoilers given, but the game that I watched, Reconnoiter, it did struggle a bit. Being a pure infantry army, I could see it was a little bit tough to be able to like get around to objectives and stuff, especially against a very mobile Dragon Emperor army. But when I say it can fight with the best. Okay, so let's look at some of Team Poland's evil armies. We have the Dragon Emperor. They had one of their own. It's Dragon Emperor in Warband 1 leading 16 Black Dragons with Shield and Pike, 1 Black Dragon Cataphract, 1 Black Dragon Cataphract with War Drum. Warband 2, Ratabi leading 5 Easterlings with Shield and Pike, 2 with Shield. 3rd Warband, Brogear leading 8 Easterlings with Shield, 2 with Bow, and 2 Dragon Cult Acolytes. Warband 4, we have Easterling Captain on Armored Horse. Also 41 models. I don't know if that's a special number to Team Poland, but yeah, 2 bows. What do you guys think of this variant? I mean, we've seen a lot of Dragon Emperors running around, but
Captain's an interesting pick. Usually you just see people bulking out the numbers a bit, like filling up Rutabi's warband. I guess it's just to get the mounted threat in there. Because he can still, like, if you sneak in somebody near the Dragon Emperor, you can get fight 5 and do his fight, so he can still do some decent damage, and or just run around the board capturing objectives. That might be just his whole point.
yeah. I mean, I guess it also gives the army a bit more might at 800 points. Mounted threat, and I guess if you really need to, you combo the march and the drum. That's a lot of movement.
And also the single drop, right? Single drop can be nice too
True.
in certain scenarios.
That's true. You can see a lot of the deployment. But yes, enough about the Dragon Emperor. Charles, do you want to go through this list?
This is a Witch King Saladin list. None of us have ever seen this alliance before.
Being sarcastic. Being sarcastic.
We have Witch King of Angmar on Felbeast with Crown, 315-3, leading 6 Black Numenorians, 6 Morannon Orcs with Shield, Spear, Axe, 5 Orc Trackers, and 1 War Rider with Shield. Second warband is a generic Ringwraith, 291, leading 6 Black Numenorians, 4 Morannon Orcs with Shield, Spear, Axe, and 2 Orc Warriors with Shield, Spear, Pick. Third warband, we have Gorbag with a Shield, leading 2 Black Numenorians, 3 Orc Warriors with Shield, Spear, Axe, 3 Orc Trackers, and 1 Warg Rider with Shield and Throwing a Spear. And then final warband, we have Suladan mounted on Armored Horse, leading 2 Haradrim Warriors with Bow and Spear and 1 Serpent Rider. That's 46 models and 10 bows.
It's good.
I mean, the biggest difference, I guess, is just the Ring Wraith and Gorbag as the second pick. Sometimes you see like a third, like a bigger hero, like a Shagrat or another like named Wraith running around, instead of two smaller ones. But I mean, makes sense. Gorbag's solid. He brings a strike, and then getting the second caster in there really helps make the Witch King work for shutting things down.
Usually you'll see, or at least I've seen Guritz as the pick for March, but I like the Wraith here bringing the March and the second caster.
And the second caster is nice, especially with the Witch King has the Fell Beast, right? Just to help trigger traps and stuff for that.
If I were to do the build myself, I would probably do Witch King on horse, and then maybe instead of Gorbag, do like Mouth of Sauron or something. But I think the Fell Beast adds a lot of flexibility. And Andrew, one of our guests that comes on the show, he's a huge advocate for Witch King on Fell Beast, and he thinks it's currently underrated. So, and obviously Team Poland did very well with it. So
what do you guys think of the 8 orc trackers? Is that seems like a bit more than what you would usually take for honesty bows? And if you were to want more shooting, I could see maybe the average player going more for more Harad archers because they're much better.
It's partially a way to boost the numbers, right? Like
They're so cheap, right?
Yeah, they're only 5 points, and Black Numenorians and Miranda Norse Spear and Shield, they're both 9 points each compared to a 5-point tracker, right? So it's an easy way to get the numbers up from like low 40s to mid 40s, which could make the difference in a game for breaking a lot of the time. And it's you're evil, so a lot of the time I think you want to keep them there to shoot into combat, right? That's what you use your bows for that a lot. And if you're doing that, the limited range doesn't matter as much.
Yeah. And you have over 20 models that are D6. So even though it doesn't seem like that horde for Mordor, it's going to be pretty difficult to break.
I just want to add that, like, maybe it's because I've been playing some Assault on Lothlorien, but I really like the old orc trackers. I don't think 8 is too much. And I mean, like with the 4+ shoot, and like Ian said, a lot of the times you're shooting into combat or trying to get a horse or something, like range doesn't matter too much. And 4+ to hit for 5 points is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean that combined with like the double black dart potential, like I don't think most mounted heroes aren't going to make it there with their horse.
Okay. Next evil list. Ian?
Absolutely not. Don't make me do this.
Yeah, it's your favorite list. Come on.
I hate it. It's the worst. It's the worst. Ugh. Ugh. You got new shitty shaman. All right. Fine. Musgore. Fuck. Okay, let me start over. Okay, so the last one is Assault on Lothlorien. Warband 1, and the who has to be the leader is going to be Musgore. He has 13 Orc Warriors with Shield and Axe, 1 Orc Warrior with Banner and Axe, 1 Warg Rider with Shield and Throwing Spears. Second Warband is Drizag. He has 2 Bat Swarms, 2 Giant Spiders, and 11 Moria Goblins with Spear and Bow. Warband 3 is a Wild Warg Chieftain with 3 Wild Wargs. Warband 4 is a Moria Goblin Shaman, 4 Moria Goblins with Spear and Bow, 4 Moria Goblins with Spear, and Warband 5 is an Orc Shaman, 10 Orc Warriors with Shield and Axe, 1 Orc Warrior with Spear and Axe, and 1 Warg Rider with Shield and Throwing Spears. So that comes to 62 models, 19 bows, and 5 warbands with 4 different casters in it.
I really like this. Props to this Polish player, because there's been a lot of talk about this Legendary Legion, obviously, and it's kind of landed on the consensus that the most efficient way to play this list is without the Wild Warg Chief, which I see the argument for, because even though 80 points is not a lot, like in this list it is, because you can get so much more other stuff. But I have had success with the Wild Warg Chief as well. And to me, it's just, it brings something to this army that the rest of the list doesn't, because a lot of the tricks that Assault on Lothlorien has, and it does have a lot of tricks, is mostly in the movement and the shoot phase. And by the time combat rolls around, there's no tricks. It's like you've already kind of made all your moves. So adding the Wild Warg Chief and having the hero combat there available, especially if he's enraged, adds a lot of depth in the tactics that you can pull off.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. That's always been my experience playing against Assault on Lothlorien is like you said, they're once you get through the movement phase, you're kind of like, okay, I can react and I can own the combat phase, but that dynamic changes when you have the Wild War Chieftain. That being said, if you are gonna run the Wild War Chieftain, I'm surprised he didn't go for Ashrak as well instead of the Moria Goblin Shaman because I know you want the fury for your troops, but he's setting it up to have the orcs up front, and he has the orc shaman for that fury to cover the orcs. So like your front rank at least is going to be able to charge, and you have enough heroes sitting in the back rank that should be able to stand fast all the goblins. So I still think Ashrak is the better take over the Moria Goblin Shaman because he's what 55 points. So you drop two goblins to get him in there instead of that shaman, and I think the build rounds out better with the Wild War Chieftain. But what do you guys think?
I don't know if he has enough giant spiders. I think that's the balance because when you take Ashrak, you almost want to take more giant spiders to make it like more cost efficient. So to me, it's probably better to choose one, either the Wild War Chief or Ashrak, in my opinion, because Ashrak, it's not just the 10 more points, right? You probably want to take one or two more spiders at least.
Yeah, because if you do a build with Ashrak, then I guess you can swap the Wild War Chieftain's whole warband for 5 spiders. That'd be pretty scary. They all be venom backs, and you have the buffs from Ashrak too.
Because I think the more common build that you see now is instead of the Wild War Chief, you do see the Orc Captain on Warg, which I guess can also, do a little bit of hero combating here and there, but it just takes a lot more setup and like I think a bit more predictable because you need to like get a bat swarm in there as well for it to really go off. Otherwise, you just fight for, right? And I mean, the nice thing though is it does provide a march. So I don't know. I like that there's some wiggle room, being able to see, at one of the most competitive events and on the winning team, you do see like maybe a variant that was not considered the best by some of the, not only in North America, but British players talk about it as well. So yeah, I like it.
I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, this is probably the first Assault on Lothlorien list I've seen that doesn't have a Prowler.
Very true.
Not a single Prowler.
That is a good call. Yes, because that is also something that people recommend spamming out. And I like my throwing weapons +1 to wound as well.
I I think that's an effect of the FAQ because you have to take the 50 because if you're trying to spam like get a bunch of prowlers in there to make it worth it and maximize your bows on the goblins, you only end up with like 50% of your force is orcs, and then a bunch of it is 50% is goblins with bow, or 33% is goblins with bow. You only get like a small fraction that can be prowlers, and then it eats into like how you build it, right? In a weird
True.
way.
But then in that way, in that case, you would take orc trackers to keep the bow limit. I
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're worse. They're much worse in the list, right?
yeah. I see that he's given all the goblin archers spear, so they're up to 7 points, which is the same. He could have traded 1-for-1 for a prowler as
Yeah,
well.
I'm actually also surprised that he didn't go for any for any orc trackers as well because I think I was just blinded by the Wild War Chief pick. I was like, oh yeah, but this list AOL list is actually quite different. I actually do rate a few trackers in there just because 4+2 hit, and then in this list +1 to wound, that makes it incredibly consistent. So I know they're really, really squishy, and maybe that's why he didn't take him, but I do rate at least a few orc trackers in this list.
Yeah, that's a good shadow hitting on the fours in this. Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking the Warg Chieftain might actually be a better pick in the good versus evil format because it's much more reliable than a Venom back or a Captain at assassinating something when combined with the Bat Swarm. And if you're playing against good lists, you're going to expect to play a lot more like big heroes than if you're playing like where you could play good like blue versus blue.
Yeah, but he has Druzag in there, right? You can always enrage a venom back. But I see what you're
Mm.
talking about. Warg Chieftain is the most consistent hitter out of those options because he also has 2 might, which they have limited use, but he can use it to boost his own rolls.
I mean, I think from what we've seen from the other lists as well, like there's a fair amount of elves in Fight 6, right? So I think to Ian's point, a giant spider, even if you're enraged, if you don't get the bat swarm in, fight 6 might not be good enough against regular warriors. Whereas like the chieftain goes from fight 5 to fight 7 while enraged, right? So that can basically beat any warrior battle line. Enough of the serious list. We have 2 of their dummy lists. So these are the last two lists that we'll be looking at today. So their first one, just going through briefly their heroes, is Glorfindel, kitted out, leading 15 elves, Círdan and Warband 2, solo drop. Warband 3 is a dwarf king leading some Khazad-guard, a dwarf with banner, some dwarf warriors. Warband 4, we have a dwarf king with a few more Khazad-guard, and that is 38 models. And then on the evil side, their dummy list is basically just a mix of Uruk-hai orcs. Oh, I do see a demolition bomb in there, but it's not Assault on Helm's Deep. It's Ugluk, Gorolf, Vrasku, and 3 Isengard ballistas, as well as the demolition bomb. So 47 models. So
I,
yeah.
I mean, like the good list, I don't know. Maybe they're just really, really worried about courage. That's why they have that much redundancy. The evil list is just Assault on Helm's Deep, but vanilla Isengard, and probably better than Assault on Helm's Deep now because you get the named heroes.
Is it? I feel like the demolition bomb is kind of sketchy without the Legion bonus, but I agree the ballista is probably now like pretty much just as good outside of the Legion.
Yeah, like
The reroll ones, it
Yeah.
doesn't come up nearly as much as
Yeah.
before.
like your troops are weaker because you have some orcs mixed in there, but Gorolf is actually a credible thing to go tie up big enemy heroes to allow you to like position the demo team if you want. And then Ugluk just has strike, which is nice.
Yeah.
Like you just get more tools.
So for dummy lists, you're trying to not be obvious with them, right? So
Yeah, so they should be somewhat competitive.
yeah. So this is interesting because all the other lists we reviewed on this team were like, wow, this is a really good competitive list. And then I'm looking at these two, and just if we had played a guess the dummy list, these two might have been the ones I picked. Maybe they stand out a little bit more like oddball compared to the previous 6. Like way different than any standard tournament list you would see.
The good lists, there's something there. It's an incredibly grindy list. It reminds me of like Ian's Rivendell Arnor list, right? With Glorfindel, Círdan allied in. So I mean the dwarves are doing a similar role here.
Well, they are, but I mean they're hitting harder, right? Because they have the strength 4 base and the can 2 hand. I still think you try and get the King's Champ in there, no?
Yeah.
As opposed to a second Dwarf King. Like once you factor in the guy with a banner, what's that? That's 110 points, and then 2 more Dwarf Warriors, which would be the Heralds, so your model count doesn't change. Or one more, you only lose 2 models and you get the King's Champ.
Yeah.
I think that's just a way more convincing build.
It might have been a real list if they had King's Champion.
Yeah. And like having Círdan drop by himself is weird. I mean, I guess you can only take a 6 guys, but there's a 1/3 or sorry, 1 in 6 chance you're gonna play a random deploy scenario, and then you have to accept that Círdan's gonna die, or you're deploying your entire army around wherever he shows up. It doesn't seem like a very convincing list.
And I think the evil list is just like, I can see why it was submitted to strike fear in the heart of their enemies.
Yeah. That one I could see is like potentially see as like a legitimate build. Just like, yeah, for what you're saying, like 14 crossbows plus Vrashku and 3 ballistas. Ouch.
Is this like the replacement for the Legion now? Now that it's nerfed to the ground, this is the ballista list you run.
I mean, I'm not entirely convinced because it's not great against courage shenanigans, but like, does that like if this list goes up against a list with Círdan, how does it feel about that? Right? Because
I,
like it's gonna have the blinding light and the terror bubble,
I
unless
think
they
you just,
snipe it with the ballistas.
yeah, I think you just try to snipe Círdan.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or
Which
3 turns. Maybe you take them down.
maybe you can, I guess, if you're firing 3 ballistas, but it's 3 without any rerolls.
Yeah. I did run 3 ballistas at the last Nova against a Kirdan and didn't kill him. So
That's
There you
your
go.
fault for not rolling into 2 natty 6s. All right. So yeah, that's what we have for today. Yeah, I would say from what I saw on stream and stuff, shout out to all the organizers and everyone who put together the event, because it looked really well done, and it was obviously still the first year, so it makes me definitely interested to join in future years potentially. It was great having like a live stream and to follow like the top tables and stuff like that. Shout out to everyone who was involved. Any last thoughts, guys?
I mean, it was interesting. Like a lot of the lists that are up at like the ones that we saw, they were kind of like the overall lists were predictable, but like you guys said, like the builds were different from what we'd expect, at least locally here, which is nice to see.
yeah, hope Canada and USA do a little bit better next year.
Got to represent North America a little bit more.
All
We
right.
can only go up from here.
Literally.
What is that thing from Ricky Bobby? If you ain't first, you're last.
Well, thank you all for watching this video. Look forward to the next episode of Into the West podcast.